Today, we're going to talk about something that's absolutely critical to modern technology and national security, but it's also pretty much invisible to most of us. We're talking about rare earth magnets. And really, this is the story of a massive strategic dependency and the high-stakes race to break free from it.
So let me ask you this. What in the world does a state-of-the-art fighter jet have in common with a giant offshore wind turbine? Or, for that matter, the electric car that might be sitting in your neighbor's driveway? Well, the answer is a tiny, ridiculously powerful, and strategically vital little component.
They're called neodymium iron boron magnets, or, NdFeB for short. Now, these are not your average refrigerator magnets, not even close. They are, quite literally, the strongest permanent magnets you can buy. And they're the absolute secret sauce that makes so many of our high-efficiency electrical machines actually work.
But what makes them so special? Well, their incredible power allows for amazing miniaturization and efficiency, and that makes them essential for two of the most important sectors of the 21st century, national defense and the green energy transition. Oh, and not all of these magnets are created equal. That's a really crucial detail we're going to come back to.
I mean, the sheer range of things they're used in is just staggering. We're talking about the guidance systems for missiles and the power systems in fighter jets, but at the same time, they're the core technology inside the motors of pretty much every electric vehicle and the massive generators in offshore wind turbines. For these key applications, there's no substitute. They're irreplaceable.
And that indispensability, well, that leads us right to the heart of the problem. You see, one country has spent decades deliberately and very successfully positioning itself to dominate the entire global supply chain for these critical magnets.
Okay, let's just start with one number to get our heads around this. In 2021, the United States imported 75% of its sintered NdFeB magnets directly from China. But honestly, that number, as shocking as it is, doesn't even begin to tell the whole story. To really get it, you have to look at the entire process, the entire value chain. And this didn't happen by accident. No way. This was a deliberate strategy executed over decades with huge state subsidies and, frankly, lax environmental standards that just undercut all the global competition. So by 2020, China controlled 58% of the initial mining, a jaw-dropping 89% of the crucial oxide separation step, 90% of turning that into metal, and an overwhelming 92% of the final magnet production.
And then there's this number. Remember how I said not all magnets are the same? Well, for the really high-performance stuff, like missile guidance systems or EV motors that run super hot, you have to add what are called heavy rare earths, things like dysprosium and terbium to the mix. And today, China produces 100% of the world's separated supply of these vital elements. 100%.
This dominance paints a pretty stark picture of America's vulnerability. Sure, the US has mining capacity, we can dig the stuff out of the ground, but look at the rest of the chain. Carbonates processing? Near zero. Oxide separation? Near zero. Metal refining? Literally zero capacity. Alloy production? You guessed it, near zero. These complex downstream steps are the real choke point, and the US is almost completely out of the game.
So, as you can imagine, this kind of extreme dependency has not gone unnoticed. The US government has officially recognized this issue for what it is, not just some economic headache, but a direct threat to national security. And the official response was to launch what's called a Section 232 investigation. This is a pretty powerful tool the government uses to figure out if imports of a certain product are actually harming the country's ability to defend itself. And the conclusion, which came out in June 2022, was, well, it was completely unambiguous. The final report said, and I'm quoting here, that magnet imports threatened to impair the national security. The verdict was in. The alarm bells were ringing, loud and clear, at the highest levels of government.
So with the problem officially defined and the alarm bells ringing, the race began. A race to build a real alternative, a complete mine-to-magnet supply chain entirely outside of China, led by a handful of key players in the West.
Now, two companies are really at the forefront of this whole effort. Here in the US, you've got MP Materials. They're aiming to become America's one-stop shop, a fully integrated producer, and they're building magnet facilities with government backing. Then you have Australia's Lynas Rare Earths, which is a global leader. They're building a new processing plant right in Texas with funding from the Department of Defense. And here's the critical part. Lynas is the first company in decades to produce those separated heavy rare earths outside of China. That is a huge deal.
But look, private companies can't do this alone. They need government policy that actually levels the playing field. And that's where ideas like the Secure Minerals Act come in.
The whole goal is to create a strategic reserve of these materials, which would give the U.S. government tools to stabilize prices and fight back against the kind of market manipulation that has historically made it almost impossible for Western companies to compete.
All of this feeds into the official government battle plan that the Commerce Department recommended. It's really a multi-pronged attack. You've got working closely with allies, using tax credits to encourage domestic manufacturing, using Defense Production Act funds for those critical midstream facilities, boosting recycling efforts, and even funding research into possible alternatives.
So, okay, the plan is in motion, the race is on, but the road ahead is anything but smooth. It's filled with some really sobering realities and a complex geopolitical twist that kind of complicates the entire effort.
So check this out. This chart reveals a really sobering paradox. U.S. domestic production of rare earth compounds and metals, it more than doubled between 2021 and 2022. That's fantastic news, right? But here's the catch. In that exact same period, our net import reliance actually increased, going from 53% to 67%. So how is that possible? Well, it's because global demand is just growing even faster than our production, and a lot of these magnets are already embedded in finished products we import from overseas.
And this brings us right back to what we could call the strategic cliff. Despite all the progress being made on light rare earths, the U.S. still has absolutely no commercial-scale production of those critical heavy rare earths. We remain 100% import reliant. For our most advanced defense systems and high-performance electric vehicles, this is still the single biggest bottleneck.
But there's one final crucial twist to this whole story. Building a new Western supply chain, that requires deep, long-term trust and coordination with allies like Australia, Canada, and Japan. But as the analyst Cullen Hendricks points out here, what happens when U.S. political stability and the continuity of its policies, what happens when that becomes part of the risk calculation for our own allies?
And that leaves us with this final, critical question. The entire strategy to escape this trap is built on a foundation of alliances and partnerships. But can the West really build a resilient alternative to China if its closest allies are starting to wonder whether they can even depend on America? It's a question that goes right to the very heart of the magnet trap.